For 13 years, from 1978 to 1991, TV audiences worldwide tuned into the TV drama Dallas, a story about two warring oil families in Texas, the Ewings and the Barneses. For many TV fans unfamiliar with our city, the TV show Dallas represented a simplistic view of what people imagine Texas oil families to be like. Even today, the stereotype that a family living in Dallas lives like a member of the Ewing or Barnes family is not reality.
Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, J.R. Ewing, Major Nelson, Larry Hagman.
Certain aspects of this business you never get used to. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very happy to be back in Dallas. Matter of fact, I'm really happy to be anywhere. As you all know, I had a liver transplant 6 years ago. They put a 35-year-old liver in a 70-year-old man, and it makes me about 52. So I've always had a warm welcome here. When I first came down to shoot Dallas, it was not quite so warm. Nobody likes their hometown held up for ridicule or whatever. I remember going to the Dallas Country Club and watch a little Sunday football, and when it was over, I got up and thanked the little guys, and I said, "Thank you for having me here, boys, and I'll see you around." And as I was walking to the door, one of them said, "And thank you for coming, boy." Cold shiver ran up my back. But after 13 years of really warm welcomes, and I mean warm, we worked down here only in July and August through somebody's wisdom in Hollywood. They didn't know. It was just a bunch of actors frying out there. But you've always been so warm to us, and I think we helped take off the onus of the assassination capital of the world. You know, when we came down here, that's all Dallas was known for. But now if you go abroad and say you're from Dallas, they say, "Oh, you know JR." You can get a free drink just about any place in the world. So I want to thank Bryan's House for having me here. It's a wonderful cause and a very necessary one. And I'm really grateful and honored to be here. And I want to thank Caroline Hunt for having me at the Crescent at the Mansion for all those years, sitting right over there. She's a good friend and has put up with my nonsense for 13 summers. Thank you, honey. Thank you. Now, you want to have a question and answer period? All right, let's do it.
Howdy. Oh, turn that down or turn me down, one or the other. They have prepared a list of questions here, but I have one that I'd like to start with, Larry. Are you about sick of that theme song?
I never get sick of that theme song. I love it. It's my intro everywhere I go.
I would think that, you know, as an actor, this is like Actor Studio, you'll have to forgive me a little bit. As an actor, you wrestle with the idea of being defined by a role and only that role, as opposed to the other things that you've done. But you don't seem to have a problem with old JR.
Well, I was lucky enough to have I Dream of Jeannie. How many people saw I Dream of Jeannie out there? Raise your hand. Well, everybody, right? I get them from the cradle to the grave. Oh, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that way. And Dallas, well, Dallas, you know, I'm proud of that. I've been lucky to have two great roles and two totally different roles.
Yeah, I remember, and I mentioned I Dream of Jeannie a few minutes ago, but I remember thinking, this man is a natural comic. He's a natural comedic actor. He's got the timing and everything. And then in the next big series, pure evil with a kind of a glint in your eye. Is it the same thing, two sides of the same coin?
Well, I always considered Dallas as kind of a cartoon anyhow, you know. It was funny as far as I was concerned. And I think if you examine it and look at it over the years, you'll find it amusing too.
There seemed to be real chemistry between you and the cast, the rest of the cast on I Dream of Jeannie. Was that the case? I mean, it seemed like you enjoyed each other.
Oh yeah, we had well, comedy's not funny. Comedy's hard work. And often, the only thing I ever had was with the writers. And it was Sidney Sheldon at the time, and he'd won Academy Award, and he's written about, I think he's got 200 million books out there or something. So you can't really argue with a guy who's the most successful author in the world. But we've settled our differences, and the show went on. The only thing that happened to the show that killed it was we got married, and it ruined that sexual tension that we had going.
Everybody was wondering, and then once the question was answered, there was no fun in it.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right.
You shared a story, and I was listening to you on a talk show this morning. It's in the book, if I'm not mistaken, about a moment when you would freeze a scene in order for Jeannie to disappear or something. They would stop the tape, and you would have to hold your breath.
Yeah.
And then they'd roll the film again, and you'd pick up where you left off.
Yeah, well, that was the technique. You'd be having a conversation, somebody would say freeze, and you'd hold that until they either pop me into another costume or Jeannie turned into an alligator or whatever. Well, this particular one, they popped an elephant in between us. She was on one side and I was on the other. And they tried to back it into the scene.
And you were on the wrong end.
Well, yeah, and just as they said 1, 2, 3 action, it broke wind. And I've never seen an aperture quite that big before, but, and it was a misty wind. Anyhow, we had to close down the show after that. It took too long. We resumed shooting the next day. Yeah.
For anyone who thinks acting is a glamorous profession, that's enough.
Yeah, never work with animals or genies.
Was the chemistry on the cast or the set of Dallas the same? It seemed like everybody enjoyed it.
Oh yeah. There was a big family. We had 13 years of really wonderful relationships, and I've kept a lot of relationships with Pat Duffy. We go hunting and fishing a lot down here in Texas, down in Corpus Christi, as a matter of fact. And with Linda Gray, who's remained a great friend of my wife and myself. My wife calls her wife. They call each other wife. And I just saw her in The Graduate in London just last week, and she has a nude scene in there, and I saw more than I've ever seen her in 25 years. And revelation, she's in great shape.
In the book, you talk about Barbara Bell Geddes and the fact that once you learned that she was on board to play Miss Ellie, you decided that show's for me.
Well, she's a class act, And when I heard she's going to be on the show, I said, boy, if she's on, I'm on too. Well, I was going to be on anyhow because I was broke and I'd do anything at the time, but it did help me say yes.
Were there ever any, obviously between the director, the producer, the writers, there's always a little creative friction there, but between cast members?
No. Somebody said, asked me that question today, and I can't remember one instance we had any trouble with each other. I always made it a point that if there was any friction going on, I'd go right to the source and talk to him and see what we could all do to make it work, because that's the way you keep harmony on the set. You get it out in the open.
And once again, if you have those questions, make sure you get them to the volunteers, and we'll get to those in just a second, because I can think of 30 or 40, and I don't want to take up all the time with my questions. When you, obviously from Weatherford, and Texas, you knew Texas, played football, hunted, did all of that, cowboyed here and everything else, and you brought a lot of things you'd seen in other Texans to bear in the character of J.R. Ewing. Talk about that, and talk about the experiences, as you mentioned the Dallas Country Club a few minutes ago, of actually shooting here, and parties you had at Wellington's or Elan or wherever you got together and met people, and what happened while we were shooting those first few seasons.
Oh, well, let me tell you how I got the character first. My dad was on a retainer to a guy named Jess Hall in Weatherford, Texas, and he had invented a centralizer and a scratcher which cleans out the inside of a pipe stem going down and bringing oil out of the ground. And my mother had come to me in Vermont, and where I was going to school, and asked me if I wanted to go on the road with her and Annie Get Your Gun. And she had rented a horse and carriage, and we were going around this very picturesque little town of Woodstock, Vermont. And she stopped and she said, "Would you like to go on the road with me?" And I couldn't think of anything to say. And so I was looking at this horse's ass, and I said, "No, I want to be a cowboy." So I left there and came down to live with my daddy, and he was on a retainer with Jess Hall, Senior. And when he died, there was a power struggle among the family, and Jess Hall Jr. won. And so that's who I modeled my character after. And he's probably finding out about that right now. So I expect a lawsuit any minute, I suppose. You probably want a piece of my action. That's
a little bit of those residuals.
Yeah.
And the experiences arriving in Dallas, setting up, shooting those first few years?
Well, the first few years, the first couple of years was a little dicey with the folks who lived down here, but finally, when JR got shot, I think all was resolved because it was such an international success. And then things were smooth sailing after that.
And you literally cannot go anywhere in the world without someone saying JR, JR, JR.
Yeah.
Everyone knows you. You're a cultural icon.
It's wonderful. I love it. Yeah.
It is fun. And I didn't know this until today, and again, I heard this on one of the shows that you were visiting, that everybody on the show shot you.
Oh, yeah. Well, we didn't want anybody to know, so we shot everything up until the last scene where it was revealed that I shot. And Mama shot me, and Daddy shot me, and Patrick shot me, and Sue Ellen shot me. And I mean, and the assistant stage manager and the guy who cleaned up around he shot me. And so nobody knew who was going to do it. And I was offered $250,000 if I would reveal who did it to a conglomerate of newspapers in London and The Hague and South Africa. And I would go there and tell the person, and then that reporter would be sequestered until finally down in South Africa. And I was thinking of doing it. I didn't know who did it, at that time. But I was thinking of doing it because that was the thing JR would do anyhow, But I didn't. I had morals, I don't know anymore.
There is much more to this book than just the Hollywood side of your life. There's also a great deal about, you're very open and honest about your addictions and your health problems. Let's start with the thing I alluded to earlier. You used to, and I think you still do sometimes, carry around a little fan and just...
I didn't bring it today. Well, nobody smokes here. I was in England. Everybody smokes there, and I use it quite often. But here, everybody stopped because I helped stop it.
You did?
Yeah.
You cleaned up the town.
Well, they cleaned up the country.
Yeah. And
I was instrumental in helping getting smoking off airlines, if anybody flies anymore.
Why was that such a passion for you?
Well, it kills 500,000 Americans every year. And it's a voluntary death, and it's not including the quality of life it affects. Mm-hmm. And it's if it came out now, it'd be illegal like everything else that's any fun.
You also talk about your addiction to alcohol.
Yeah.
The fact that you had a problem with that.
Well, I didn't have a problem. My liver had a problem. I drank steadily during Dallas and before. I started drinking when I was 14, like most people, and smoking tobacco. And I just kind of got more and more and more until I was finally, during the latter years of Dallas, drinking about 5 bottles of champagne a day. And I never got loaded. I just kind of got that click. I'd start about 9:30 in the morning, a little orange juice in there to get my vitamins, and just kind of, and then about noon I'd quit the orange juice and just stick to plain. And I just kind of leveled out and just had a good time, never missed my lines or anything like that. But it was destroying my liver, which it finally did. And that made me give up, but a little too late.
What happens when someone walks in and says, Mr. Hagman, you need a new liver?
It gives you pause for thought, to say the least. But at that time, I developed encephalopathy, which is when you have a bad liver, things aren't working. You have so much toxins in your body that your brain's not working too good. So I said, well, look, I've had 64 really good years, and so let's call it quits. And my wife said, no way. No way. And so I got my liver. I didn't have to wait too long. Once I got on the beeper, they give you a little beeper and you walk around, and when that beeps, you're supposed to call the hospital. Well, it went off twice, and they'd called the wrong number. Can you believe that?
Oh, my heavens.
Yeah, that gives you a little thump. Oh, sorry. And finally, the third one came, and I called the hospital, and the doctor said, well, I got good news and I got bad news. And I said, well, give me the bad news first. He says, well, we're not going to be able to go on the fishing trip that your wife and I had planned for you this weekend up in Alaska because we got a liver, and that's the good news. We've dispatched a helicopter to come pick you up. And I got on the helicopter and went down to the hospital and had the biggest enema I ever had in my life. And they wheeled me into the operating room, playing the theme from Top Gun. No, Dallas, that's what they were doing. Yeah. And when they showed me up and taking me out, that was Top Gun.
Which might explain what you did next, because if I had just conquered smoking on airlines, and if I had just had a liver transplant, I don't think that I would go riding on a motorcycle And I don't think that I would do a Gary Busey impersonation and lay the thing down.
Oh, wait a minute, I had my helmet on.
Well, I know, but you know, that's...
Well, I don't know. You know, I've been riding for 40 years, and I courted Maya on a Vespa in London, and so she's been riding on the back of it for 40 years, and finally graduated to Harley Davidson. And I just made a mistake. I was going down the hill. I just got out of my gate at my house up in Ojai, and I was going down the hill, and a car came around a little fast, and I hit the front brake, which I never do, and it just went like that, pow, wow, and I broke 3 ribs. And that was when I was doing primary colors. Mm-hmm. So about 5 days later, I reported for work, and they had 3,000 people in a scene there where I'm running for president. I'm declaring my run for presidency. And I walked up to Mike Nichols, and he saw me coming with my arm in a sling. He says, "Are you going to wear that?" I said, "No, I can take it out, but I can't move it." He said, "Well, I got you at the podium." He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'll just lift it up on the podium and put it like that." So I went out there and did my thing, and it worked pretty well. And what was I talking about? I digress so much I forget what the hell I'm talking about.
Broken ribs.
Oh, broken ribs. Yeah. Well, yeah, but that goes with growing old. You just don't want to give up those things, you know. I've recently taken up parapowering, which is you strap a motor with a propeller on your back, and you have this elliptical parachute, and you can run a few feet, and you take off, and you can fly all over the place. That's really good. That's fun.
How long have you all been married?
47 years.
How have you done this? 47 years.
Yeah.
How? I've never seen you two together, but you're not beaming. You absolutely glow when you're with each other.
Oh, yeah. Well,
what's the secret?
She plugs me in. Yeah. Oh, God, here we go again. Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Texas girls. Oh, no.
This note says, ask if you have a question, please raise your hand so the volunteers can spot you, but we have quite a few here, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Before we do, very quickly, Primary Colors, wonderful movie, and a wonderful little role, and a lot of fun. My favorite, if I had a choice of 10 films to take with me to the island, one would be Failsafe, and that was your first movie.
First movie, yeah.
And you played across from Henry Fonda, who was I don't know if you've seen the film, but it's the doomsday Cold War scenario, and Henry Fonda's the president, and Larry is the translator in the war room beneath the White House, and you have to play a role in which you're required to sit on the phone, listen to the Russian premiere, Soviet premiere, and translate into English, but it's the most remarkable performance in a remarkable movie. Where did that come from? It was your first movie.
Yeah.
How'd you do that?
How'd I do what?
Failsafe's a darn good movie. What'd you think?
Oh, I like it. Oh, the Russian. Well, I was listening to the guy in Russian, but it wasn't a guy. It was another guy out there speaking English. And then I pretended that I was interpreting. And as a matter of fact, I went out to California. I was broke, and I was looking for a job out there. And somebody had seen the film and said, "You speak Russian, don't you? I got a great part as a Russian interpreter." I said, "Yep, absolutely." So he gave me the part, and I hired a guy to teach me Russian overnight. And it was only a few lines, but it paid, you know, enough to send back to Maya and feed the kids and all.
If you have a chance to rent that movie, rent it. It's unbelievable. And my last question, and we'll get to these. How did 40-something years? That's just in Hollywood. It's remarkable. It's a remarkable thing anywhere, and it's a wonderful relationship.
Oh.
Beyond being plugged in, what's the secret to your success?
Oh, my wife says 2 bathrooms. Think about it. In the morning, rushing around, 2 bathrooms is an absolute necessity.
It's in the book. Your questions. A 2-parter. Number 1, how did you feel when Dallas was canceled? And number 2, what members of the cast do you still keep up with?
Well, I felt okay. 13 years is a long time for any series, but I would have done it 25 years. Didn't matter. It was a license to steal, really. I only worked about a half a day, 3 days a week at the end there. So, you know, they would build a scene around what my reaction is to what was going on, and they'd say, "Oh, JR's going to come on, he's going to be angry," and and I come on with my smile on my face, you know, and scare the hell out of everybody. It was fun. And when it ended, well, it ended, that's all.
And you keep up with some of your
I
friends?
keep up with Patrick Duffy. Like I said, we go hunting fishing a lot. And Linda Gray and my wife and I, we have dinner probably twice a month. And Mary Crosby's a very good friend. She's a little girl who shot me.
Yeah.
And we were real good friends. I gave her away in her marriage, and godfather to a child.
Oh, neat. Nancy Hagman wants to know when you're going to ask her back to heaven.
Anytime, Nancy. Anytime. She drove down from San Francisco for my 70th birthday just a couple of weeks, or 3 weeks ago. And because she doesn't like flying. And that time they weren't letting airplanes in the air anyhow. So.
Here's a question. Which character, JR or Major Nelson, most closely resembles your personality? Positive and negatives of both characters beyond JR. Good guy, Major Nelson, bad guy, all of that. But which one's more closely like you?
Yes. Both of them.
That's Faye Dunaway has a line in 3 Days of the Condor that says, "These are the pictures I take. They're not me, but they must be me because I took them." So, JR, there is a little JR. There is a little.
I guess there is, yeah.
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 Does he ever come up around the house or?
Not allowed.
Not allowed. 40 plus years. Describe your favorite episode of Dallas. That's not easy.
Oh, I think it was when I was putting Sue Ellen in the insane asylum. That was it. And she deserved it too, you know. She playing around with old Cliff Barnes. I loved slipping.
I remember the episode where Bryan Dennehy and a bunch of crooks had taken everybody hostage at South Fork, and you and the rest of the Ewing boys got the guns and went after it.
Yeah.
It was a real posse ride.
Yeah.
Who came up with that stuff?
I don't know. It's supposed to be a hurricane in Dallas too. Well, these are all writers from California. They didn't know hell about Texas, you know. But that's the one show that really changed the director and the producer, because we had a scene where Bryan Dennehy has us all, he's holding us hostage in our living room, and my little niece goes in a huff. She says, "Well, I'm going to go upstairs and go to bed." And as she was crossing, I had my drink in my hand, and I'm looking at her like that. And the director stops. He says, "Cut." He says, "Larry, you can't look at her like that. She's your niece." And I said, "Al, this is Texas." "Oh, that's just a joke, you know."
Oh, not in Arkansas, it's not. Sorry, Gene, I'm sorry. I forgot y'all were here. And I genuinely mean that. Larry, would you relate, I did forget, would you relate the story in the book about your mother's reply when you asked how it felt to be the son of an icon?
Oh, yeah, well, we were having a party. It was about the second or third year of the show, and we had this big house in Malibu, and CBS gave a party out there and invited all the TV editors from all over the country. And one young girl rushed up to my mother and said, "Oh, Miss Martin, what's it like to have a son as an icon?" And my mother looked at her and she says, "My dear, my son is a star. I'm an icon." She was dead right, too.
Talk about your mom for a minute. I mean, what she meant to you, and beyond the stage, what kind of mom she was.
Well, I didn't know her real well until I was about 12. My grandmother had raised me, and mother went out to get her fortune in Hollywood, and then finally ended up getting it on Broadway. But there were some years there, until I was 12, I really didn't have much contact with her. And then she married a man I was not enamored with, and he was not enamored with me, that's for sure. And so we didn't get along too well. So when my grandmother died, I went back to live with them for a year in New York, and went to Trinity School there, one of those highfalutin boys' schools. And it didn't work out. Mother would sleep until 11. I'd get up 7 o'clock, go to school, and then I'd come home at 5, and we'd have a dinner, and that was about the only contact. And on weekends she rested. She had a matinee and evening on Saturday, so we really didn't have a lot of contact. And I had a stepfather who wanted to keep us apart anyhow. He was a control freak, and so we didn't really have a relationship until Richard died, and then we started to kick in. We started living near each other and saw each other quite a bit, and we kind of fell in love with her, and she with me, and it was nice. And by this time she had grandchildren and so forth, so it was easier. It was a more buffer. And it was great. As a matter of fact, when she died, it was on a Sunday the last time I saw her, and I wasn't speaking. I wasn't talking that day. And she used to not like Bach very much. She just found it distasteful. But I used to whistle. She taught me how to whistle. And she was a really great whistler. And so when I came in the door, she started whistling a Bach convention. And I started on the counterpoint, and we did about 10 minutes of Bach whistling to it. And I kissed her goodbye, and that's the last time I ever saw her. And she died shortly after that. And it just kind of shows how, how nice a relationship we had.
Mm. Who did you beat out in the casting for J.R. Ewing?
I don't know. I don't think there was anybody even considered as a secondary role. Mm-hmm. No, I don't think anybody was thought about. Do you know anybody?
I have no idea. Honest to goodness, I can't think of anybody else who could play it.
I think you're right.
Tell us about your relationship, with your mom. We already got to that one. I don't know who it was, but why was Jeannie not allowed to show her navel?
Oh, yeah. Well, at that time, the lady who was running the standards and morals of NBC was a retired nun. And so she didn't think a navel ought to be shown. And it was a big controversy over it because it got us a lot of publicity, too,
Boy, if the navel didn't kill her, JR must have. Your hobbies. You mentioned hunting and fishing and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What else do you like?
Oh, I have a Harley. I do a lot of Harley riding with with the Uglies.
The Uglies.
Mm-hmm. That's my motorcycle group. Peter Fonda got it. It's a bunch of guys called the Uglies, and we don't have any rules, and we just ride. That's all. And most of them have like one leg and one tooth, and I think Peter and I are the only one with our own teeth. And Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell, he's in it, and Dallas Taylor, who was the drummer for Crosby, Stills and Nash, and David Crosby's in it. He's got some celebrities, but most of them are just pretty ugly.
Is there anything you haven't? Is there anything you haven't done, a role you haven't played, you'd really like to play?
Santa Claus. I'd like to play Santa Claus.
Really?
Yeah. If I grow a beard, I have a nice white beard now, so that'd be kind of fun. A lascivious Santa Claus.
Oh, gee. Lucy, come sit on my lap.
He's not going to let that go, is he?
No. I think, are there any more questions? Do we have any? Where are our volunteers? No more? Okay, we're about out of time anyway, and we know that you've got a book signing tonight.
Yeah.
At
Borders?
Is it Borders? I've got it written down here.
Preston, yeah, read it because I forgot. What country are we in? What city are we in?
How many cities have you hit on this?
Oh, well, I was in Dublin and Belfast last week, and London and New York, and now I'm here this is Dallas, and Atlanta, and then LA.
And I'm told that they are ordering reprints and extra editions in Europe.
In England.
People are snapping this up, and they can't get enough of it. And
yeah,
obviously,
well, we've sold 1,000 here. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
By the way, if I need to ask I need to say at least that if you'd like to contribute $25, there's an envelope on the table, and you're more than welcome to take the centerpiece home with you. That would be a gift in exchange for your contribution to Bryan's house. It is Borders books tonight, right? Which one are we talking about? Preston Royal? Okay, same here. I've been enamored of the answers and reading the book, and I haven't paid much attention to where you're going to be, and I can't imagine what your schedule must have been like the last few weeks. But Larry, it's a real pleasure. You've made Dallas look very good to an awful lot of people. Borders books, Preston Royal tonight at what time? 7?
6:30?
6:30?
Okay.
You're a ghostwriter?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Larry Hagman, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Let me get my hat here, honey.
In Fort Worth, we have a saying that sometimes a hat just sits good on a man. It does on Larry Hagman. This is the real world. And so is Bryan's house. The difference is, by what you do here today, you make Bryan's house world a whole lot brighter. Thank y'all for coming. Hope you have a great afternoon. Goodbye.